Here's one example of the type of question you will encounter when taking the TSI test. Keep in mind that on the TSI exam, you will not be able to use a calculator. A calculator may pop up on some questions, but you need to prepare to not be able to use a calculator on any questions. So let's practice now how to solve a question like this without a calculator. If negative 1/3 x plus 7 equals 4, what is the value for 1/3 x plus 3? First, we'll solve our initial equation. Negative 1/3 x plus 7 equals 4. You want to start by undoing the addition or subtraction. That's the plus 7. Your goal is to get your variable by itself, and we do that by undoing the operations being done to it. So, subtracting 7. And then to keep the equation equal, we do the same thing on both sides. Because plus 7 minus 7 is 0. We have negative 1/3 x is equal to negative 3. Now we can solve for x by undoing negative 1/3 times x. We can undo negative 1/3 by multiplying both sides of the equation by negative 3. A negative times a negative is a positive, and a third of 3 is 1. Or you can put this negative 3 over 1 and see how these 3's cross cancel. 1 times x is simply x, and x is 9. Keep in mind though, we weren't asked what x was, or to solve for x. We were asked what is the value of 1/3 x plus 3. So now we need to replace x with 9 and find the value of this expression. So 1/3 times 9 plus 3. You can put the 9 over 1 because 9 divided by 1 is still 9. And then follow your order of operations to simplify this expression. So that means we need to start with our multiplication. A third of 9 is 3, plus 3 is 6. So our final answer would be B, 6. That's one example of the type of problem you'll encounter when working a TSI question. Here I have a TSI practice question. This is the type of question you will encounter on the TSI test. So let's work through it. Which of the following expressions is equivalent to the quantity A plus B times the quantity A minus B? This is actually the difference of squares rule. But you don't have to memorize the difference of squares rule as long as you know how to FOIL. Let's work on FOILing A plus B times the quantity A minus B. FOILing is just a method used to remember or to keep you organized when multiplying a binomial times a binomial. And that's what these are. Bi, the prefix of binomial, just means 2. So it's 2 terms times 2 terms. That's what a binomial times a binomial means. The F in FOIL stands for first. So that's where you multiply the first term in the first set of parentheses times the first term in the second set of parentheses. So A times A, which is A squared. Then the O stands for outer or outside. So that's when you multiply the 2 terms on the outside. That'd be this A and this negative B. So A times negative B would be negative AB, since one's positive and one's negative. I stands for inner or inside, so the 2 inside terms, which would be this positive B and positive A. B times A is AB or BA. And then finally the L stands for last. So we multiply this last term in each binomial, positive B times negative B or negative B squared. Then we would combine like terms. Negative AB plus AB, those actually cancel each other out. So what we're left with is A squared minus B squared. And that's the difference of squares rule. That the quantity A plus B times the quantity A minus B is A squared minus b squared, or a. So there's an example of the type of question you'll see when taking the TSI exam. Good luck. This is a TSI practice question. It's an example of the type of question you'll see when taking the TSI exam. Remember on the TSI that you cannot use a calculator. You aren't allowed to bring one, and there won't be one provided for you. Now there will be a calculator that pops up on certain questions, but you shouldn't be counting on a calculator. So make sure you can work all your practice problems without a calculator. So let's dig into this TSI practice question. If 2 to the 4th is equal to 4 to the x, then what does x equal? Okay, so here's where we want to start. We want to make our bases equal, because if our bases are equal, then our exponents also have to be equal. We can't rewrite 2 as anything other than 2, but we can rewrite 4 as 2 squared. 2 squared means 2 times itself 2 times, and 2 times 2 is 4. So these are equal. This is 4, and it's raised to the x. So 2 to the 4th is equal to 2 to the 2x. And all I did was multiply these exponents using my rules of exponents. That when you raise a power to a power, you multiply the exponents together. Now that our bases are equal, we know that our exponents have to be equal, so you just use your exponents to write your equation, that 4 is equal to 2 times x. And now we can solve for x by dividing both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, 1 times x is x, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So x is equal to 2. Now, of course, you can check this by going back and replacing x with 2. So we would want to see if this is true. Is 2 to the 4th equal to 4 squared? Well, 2 to the 4th means 2 times itself 4 times. So 2 times 2, that's 2 of them, is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. And 4 squared means 4 times itself 2 times, so 4 times 4, which is also 16. So it checks out. And there you have an example of the type of question you'll encounter on the TSI test. Good luck. Here is the type of question you will encounter on the TSI test. It's a TSI practice question. So let's practice it. 2x squared plus 3x plus 2 minus the quantity x squared plus 2x minus 3. Really, the most complicated part about a question like this is that you have to make sure you distribute this negative or minus sign before you start subtracting. The mistake people generally make is that they try to just subtract the x squared. They'll do 2x squared minus x squared, and then for the rest of the problem, they'll add 3x and 2x, 2, and negative 3. And that's where you're going to make your mistake. So make sure you understand that you're subtracting this entire polynomial, which means the first thing you should do is distribute that negative, or negative 1. If you want to put a 1 here, that's fine. And then distribute that negative to all 3 terms. So I'll rewrite it. Nothing's happening to our first polynomial, so I'm just copying it. But now we have negative 1 times x squared, which is negative x squared, negative 1 times 2x, or negative 2x, and negative 1 times negative 3, which is a positive 3. Now we can combine like terms. So starting with your highest exponent, which is x squared, we have 2x squared minus an x squared. So you had 2x squareds, you take away an x squared, you're left with simply x squared. Then we move on to our x term, our linear term. We have a positive 3x minus 2x. 3x's minus 2x's is just an x. Finally, we have our constants, a positive 2 and a positive 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. so plus 5. And there is our answer, x squared plus x plus 5, which is answer A. And there you have an example of the type of problem you'll see on the TSI exam. Good luck. The TSI test will test your knowledge on a variety of topics, including correlation coefficients. Here's a practice question for the TSI test concerning correlation coefficients. Which of the following correlation coefficients represents the weakest correlation? Well, first of all, you'd have to know what a correlation coefficient is. A correlation coefficient is used to describe how strong or weak a correlation is between two sets of data. What do I mean? Well, they're related to scatter plots. So let me just draw a few examples of some scatter plots you might see. Okay, this first scatter plot would have a pretty strong positive correlation. Positive because our points are increasing. This second scatter plot would have a negative correlation, and I'll make it weaker by drawing some more dots that are not really in a line. And then this last scatter plot would have a very weak correlation. You might even say it has no correlation at all. The correlation coefficient is, we usually use an R for it, and it's a number between -1 and 1. And all that negative is just, it indicates that it's a negative correlation, or that our points are decreasing. So the negative has nothing to do with how strong or how weak the correlation is. The stronger the correlation, the closer it will be to -1 or to +1. The weaker the correlation, the closer it is to 0. So like this scatter plot might have a correlation coefficient of 0. That correlation coefficient would be very close to 0, if not 0. This scatter plot would have a negative correlation coefficient, but it would be fairly close to 1, so maybe -0.8 or something like that. This scatter plot would have a positive correlation coefficient, and it would be pretty close to 1, so maybe like 0.9. So with that information, the weakest correlation coefficient is the correlation coefficient that is closest to 0. So that's what you're looking for in these answer choices. You're looking for the number that's closest to 0. And that would be your -1/10. So there you have an example of the type of question you'll see when you take the TSI test. Good luck.